be accessible
There you go.
about 24 hours after this. And like I said, our supervisor, Justin, will let us know when they are available and where you can access them. So we'll let you know. All right. Um, so with that being said, I think if you guys have any general questions, we can open it up for that. And then after we have some of those questions answered, we can kind of go over what, like I said, we've flagged as what we think might be important from your first two, I should say, lecture sessions.
Do we put our questions in the chat, or do
We
you
can
want
look
us
it
You
up.
to
can
just?
speak. You can speak up if you want, or you can type them in the chat. Whatever works for you guys.
Yeah,
Okay, then I definitely have a question.
All right.
for sure.
Can we go over just in general these afferent and efferent nerves and the roots, the ganglias, the rami, just all of that?
How did I know you were gonna ask? Okay, I'm gonna see you, Aaron, Matthew, you cool with me going over this and you guys can jump in, or you guys want to take?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Um,
start from.
let me, if while she's doing that, if I can just say that, so an easy way to remember like afferent, efferent almost in a way is that the mnemonic same, SAME. So it's sensory are afferent and then motor are efferent. I don't know if that's something he mentioned, but that's one way you guys can help remember at least those things.
Okay, I'm gonna try and share my screen here with you if it'll let me.
Also, is there like specific slide that you would rather us? I mean, like that you kind of want us to look at more particularly? I know we have one in mind that probably is kind of cover all, but
I have slides, but we can just use yours.
all right.
Okay. The one that I'm gonna start with referencing to match up with your guys's, and let me know if you can see my screen, okay? It takes a minute. It will lag. Okay, can y'all see that okay? All right, perfect. So I am a big fan of mnemonics like Matthew is, and sometimes you're probably gonna think I'm stupid because some of the ways that it helps me to remember these are really silly, but it works, it sticks, so whatever means it takes, I'm for it. So we'll start with, give me just a second, let me pull this up. 2 seconds to pull up my. But this is slide 44 on your guys' first PowerPoint, and for some reason this is not letting me. Okay, so when we start here, we have. Give me a second, I'm still looking for my notes. Okay, so we know that the outer white matter, which is this stuff here. Okay, I lost you. Hello? Okay, so can you guys still?
Did you just go out?
Where'd she go?
Okay.
One second,
Uh,
guys.
Hey, Aaron, Matthew, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
I think something just happened. I'm going to reach out to uh, Tanya to see if she can get back on. I think she is running into some issues with her connection. Oh, she's back.
Is she-
Nope, she's not. Hang on. She's coming back. Give us 1 second, guys. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Oh, and hi, I'm Justin.
I guess while she gets back, I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Let's see if I can share my.
Hey, I'm on my iPad
Okay.
now. I was trying to share from my iPad and things went awry. My iPad is old and decrepit, so. But go ahead, Matthew, while I try to get this back up.
So I'll try to explain it using a different picture. Let's see if I can pull that up.
Recording is on.
Okay, can you guys see this okay? Are you guys seeing this okay? Yes, no, maybe I can't.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, we can see it good.
What I have in this picture, so we have our ventral horns in the front and our dorsal horns in the back. So the ventral horns are going to hold your motor, and then your dorsal horns are going to hold your sensory. So if we move to the dorsal root ganglion, that's where your sensory cell bodies are going to lie, are in that dorsal root ganglion. And then it's going to come out joining with the ventral root at the ventral horn to form your spinal nerve. And then it can go into many different places. So it can go through this dorsal primary ramus or this white rami communicans into the sympathetic chain ganglion, where the easy way to remember it's white then gray is it comes in clean then comes out dirty. So it goes through your white rami communicans and then out your gray rami communicans. That sympathetic chain ganglion can move up or down your spinal cord. So as soon as it enters the white rami, it can move up or down depending on where it needs to go, and then it comes out through the gray rami into these extra ventral primary ramus or dorsal primary ramus. So if there's anything else Tanya can add to that.
Can you explain that one more time with that kind of like comes out dirty sort of thing?
Yeah, so that's just an easy way to memorize it with the white versus the gray. So when it receives stuff, it's going to go through the white rami communicans into the sympathetic chain ganglion. And within the sympathetic chain ganglion, it can move up or down within the spinal cord to where it needs to go. And then once it finds out where it needs to go, it goes out the gray rami communicans.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Tanya, if you have anything else to add with your picture.
Yes. Sorry, I was having technical difficulties. But yeah, you pretty much explained it pretty well. So when we're going from, like, we start at the horns, so like either the anterior horn or the dorsal or posterior horn, and then you're going to get to the roots. So it goes horns, then roots on either side, and then you're going to get to Matthew mentioned, after the root, then you get to the ganglion. And at the ganglion, you have, like he said, the white and gray communicantes. And those are, like, the signal will come in. Pre-ganglionic is white. So before you join the gang, pre-gang, you're white, you're clean. And after the gang, like what he was saying, you're dirty. So it comes out of the gray. So that's out of the gray rami communicantes is going to be post-ganglionic. And then it goes back to, it goes back up. Does that make sense? Everybody clear with that?
Is that the communicons thing, the ganglion?
So to get to, are you talking, which ganglion are you talking about? The sympathetic
Could you
ganglion
share?
or the dorsal?
I don't know. I'm
Okay,
just trying to figure out what's
Could you
what.
it's
could
okay.
you share your again so we could see what you're looking at?
I'm gonna try to share my screen again and see if this is gonna work or if it's gonna boot me off again. So hopefully, like I said, be patient with us as we're trying to figure out how to get this to work here.
Do you want me to try to share mine? Because
Um,
I was on the same. Oh, you got it. Never mind.
okay, we'll see if this will work. Again, pardon my old way.
So
Okay,
I have a question.
yeah, go for it.
Sorry, so that whole pre and post gang, like you're talking about the sympathetic right? Like the sympathetic ganglion, because the
Yes.
dorsal was the motor, right?
Yes. So basically what will happen is, can you guys still not see my screen or is it showing?
It showed for a second, but
Aaron, you want to go ahead and show your screen because I'm
Yeah.
having a feeling this is not going to work for me using my iPad. So we learned that today. I can share screen from my laptop, I think, and that would work. But if you already have it up, that'll save us time. Okay,
Oh, there we go.
so it's slide 49. Okay, that's where I'm at, is slide 49. Yeah, okay. So see where Aaron's cursor is right now? That's the dorsal root. So let's go back. So when you go back to the butterfly looking gray thing in the middle, you have the posterior is going to be is the dorsal horn when it comes out from there. Thank you, Erin. When it comes out of the dorsal horn, okay, it's going to go out these little rootlets, those little finger projections. Okay, that's dorsal. We're looking at the back still. Okay, then it goes to the dorsal root, which is right before the ganglion, which is that little bump where his cursor is. So then from the ganglion, the next portion you have is going to be the spinal nerve, which has both the anterior and the dorsal portions to it. So you're going to have right here where it says gray rami communicantes and white rami communicantes, that connects the spinal nerve to this sympathetic ganglion. Everyone following me? We're good? Okay. So to enter in order for like conduction of the nerve to happen, it goes in through the white rami communicantes, which is the one that is going to be to like the left one. It has it labeled right there, white rami communicantes. Then it goes into the ganglion, the sympathetic ganglion, and then it goes out whenever it's leaving the sympathetic ganglion, which is where the cell bodies are located. It's going to go out through the rami communicantes. So when it goes from the spinal nerve into the sympathetic ganglion, it goes in through white and then will go out through gray. Does that make sense? Is that more clarified now? Are we cool? I don't know if I can't hear people or if people are saying stuff.
Is that you're saying then, so like the efferent signal is going through the white, the afferent signal is going through the gray?
Correct. Let me pull up my notes here.
Is the spinal nerve a bulge as well?
No, it is not a bulge. There's a better picture. It has it listed here. There's a better picture though give me a second. Okay. The way I want you to think about the spinal nerve is this. It has it there. I'm trying to find the better picture, but the best way to think about the spinal nerve is that you have those two portions coming together, right? You have your anterior horn and your your anterior root and your dorsal root coming together, and when they come together, that then becomes the spinal root. So as soon as they come together, it becomes the spinal nerve. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense.
The best picture of like a way to see it a little bit better would be on slide 44. It has the spinal nerve labeled there. So again, it's right after, see how it has it labeled there. You could even label the one above it too as spinal nerve. So it's after the anterior and posterior roots come together. That's when you're going to get your spinal root. And then just a little bit more to say on that is, okay, so the dorsal root, like we said, has sensory. Cell bodies are found in the dorsal root ganglion. And then for spinal nerve, the dorsal root ganglion and ventral root come together. It's mixed sensory and motor and autonomic neurons. And so the spinal nerve is going to be found inside the interverticular foramen. So the spaces in between your spine, in between the vertebrae, that's where the intervertebral foramen is, where these spinal nerves are coming out. I feel like we've already gone over gray and white rami communicantes pretty well. But the white and gray rami communicantes run to the both the paravertebral ganglia and the sympathetic chain. So we're looking at the sympathetic chain. This is just one link, so to speak, in the chain. Like this picture shows one sympathetic chain ganglion at one spinal cord level. But if we go to, let's say, where is it? Slide 54. It shows the whole chain that it can go down. So let's say you have something going on, like this is a really good picture here actually. You have some visceral response that needs to be tended to at your heart, right? That signal then will go up the sympathetic chain and go through the sympathetic ganglion, through the white rami communicantes, right? Because it's going in white, and then it's going to go through the dorsal. See, just follow that green. Sorry, go back up to slide 49 for me, Erin. So if we follow that green pathway, so say there's something that's happening at the heart that needs to be tended to, right? Follow that green line. It'll go through the sympathetic ganglia. So go up the sympathetic chain to whatever level it needs to go into the sympathetic ganglion, and through the white rami communicantes. That's the first one it's going to go through. Goes through the dorsal root. If we want to say everything that it's going through that the spinal ganglion, so the dorsal ganglion, through the dorsal root, through the dorsal horn, and then the anterior horn, anterior root, and then gray communicantes, and then back down to wherever it is that it needs to, through the sympathetic chain down to wherever it needs to go to gain a response. So then that blue. Does that make sense? Did I lose people?
On that line, quick question. So on that line, because it is entering the white ramus communicans and is not going back to the gray ramus communicans, would it be classified as a splanchnic nerve?
I believe so. Erin and Matthew, you can back me up if you need to, but I believe so.
Not entirely sure about that one.
I thought the splanchnic nerve bypasses the sympathetic ganglion. So instead of going through that chain, it synapses at the splanchnic nerve at whatever location that it is. And there are three. I think it's the celiac, superior mesentery, and inferior mesentery.
Have you guys learned about those yet, or no?
We went through splanchnic nerves briefly. He mentioned them a few times. We have not gone in depth with that. I was looking at some outside resources, like YouTube, like Nerd Ninja, and it sounded as though like splanchnic nerves were just nerves that branched away, did not follow the path of the spinal nerve wherever it was going. So I was just curious.
Yes, I believe that is true.
I believe you guys will probably go into more depth about it once you guys get into the viscera. But as of right now, I believe, yeah, it's true.
And I had one quick question too. One of the previous slides that you looked at, the one where you could see the different meninges, and looked at the that dura mater. So he mentioned today that there were like he talked about the teeth of the dura mater. I think it was up. I can't remember. I don't have the number of slides.
You are
Can't tell what
talking about, I think, slide 44 and the denticulate ligament.
Okay. Yes. Yes. What does he mean by like 21 pairs, and does that have anything to because my understanding was the denticulate ligaments help separate the anterior and posterior or dorsal fibers, rootlets, whatever, and that they branch into through the intervertebral foramina. So I guess what does they mean by like 21 roots, and does that have like some sort of special relevance that I need to remember?
I'm not sure about the number, but as far as denticulate ligaments go, I know that for the most part they anchor the pia mater with the dura mater. I would say that's probably the biggest thing with those.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about too much about the pairs. There's not really much significance to that. It's mostly just like what its purpose is. And it's, again, it is pia mater that is helping it to be anchored.
I would just make sure you understand its purpose and then be able to identify it if you need to.
Sorry, can y'all please repeat that again? What is it connecting?
So the denticulate ligament is the pia mater attaching to the dura mater.
Yeah, it's just lateral extensions of pia mater that are between the rootlets, and they anchor the pia mater to the dura mater. That's the biggest thing, basically, that you'll want to know about it. There's not really much else that's of significance that I would worry too much about that. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, for the
Oh, go ahead. I'm good.
I was just gonna ask for the when we doing labeling, is he gonna take pictures strictly from the dissection? The get what that thing's called? Grant's dissection videos? Is he gonna take them from like all different
He
sources?
said he's gonna take them from the Ackland's videos and the Green Sector videos.
Yeah, so Kavi, we haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, so we're not sure how your lab exams are gonna go, but that's something we can probably ask him.
But even for me, like Ackland's as a lab study tool was super helpful. So I would look at that a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't required for us, but it was like a supplemental thing that we could use for studying, and I definitely would. I mean, I don't know if it's required for you guys or not, but Ackland's was very helpful for labs.
Okay, I just want to clarify, just to make sure I'm understanding this right. I'm trying to draw as you guys are talking, because simply staring at pictures isn't working for me anymore. So, after the spinal nerve, I've got the posterior ramus and the anterior ramus. And then I have that the anterior is branching again to another form of gray and white. Is that what that picture is showing?
Okay, what do you mean by it's branching again?
So right where the spinal nerve is meeting, there's a posterior ramus nerve, and I think that's going out and innervating, I think, the back or something. And then it goes into this gray ramus to the sympathetic ganglion. So that's a different gray thing. So now I have two grays. I'm trying not to get mixed up.
Yeah, no problem.
So
you're looking at
so
what other gray thing are you talking about? Because there's the gray rami communicantes.
Yes, coming off the sympathetic ganglion. So is there not an anterior ramus, or is that the anterior ramus?
I think you're looking at where it says anterior ramus of spinal nerve. Is that where you're looking at?
I don't even. That's the thing. That's why I'm confused. Is I see posterior, but I don't even see the anterior.
So I think that the anterior ramus comes after the sympathetic ganglion. I think that's what you're referring to. It's not part of the white or gray communicans, but it comes off right after the white ramus communicans.
So what is that branching off? Is that branching off the spinal nerve, or is it?
Yeah, it's part of the spinal nerve.
Yeah.
So yes, so the spinal nerve, then after the spinal nerve comes, it then will split, and then you have your dorsal, the anterior ramus of the spinal nerve will then go to like I said, it has sensory, motor, and autonomic fibers that will go to basically innervate and help with motor and autonomic functions for everything with the exception of the back. So the dorsal ramus of the spinal nerve then will go to serve for sensory, motor, and autonomic fibers, but its primary role is for motor innervation of the deep intrinsic and deep postural muscles of the back. And then it also has some sensory innervation to the back too. But just remember, anytime we're talking about dorsal, we're always talking about the back, whether it be sensory or motor. And motor specifically, we're talking about postural muscles.
Okay, I think I'm getting.
Does that help a little bit, Christina?
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
I have a question.
Questions?
I have a question. So I was looking, so like what you just explained was the autonomic like pathway for the sympathetic. Because I'm just looking at the picture.
Yeah.
And okay, and then there's also a somatic pathway. Could it still go through the gray and white ramus, or is that only with like autonomic?
So that's more of autonomic, and here's the reason being. Look at the picture of the iron, like the hand on the iron, right? When you have something that is somatic, you're wanting a response right away. You don't want to have to travel up and down. So it goes straight from touching like the somatic sensation that is occurring. It's going to go just straight up through whatever level it's at, up through the spinal nerve, then through the dorsal ganglia, and then back, through the dorsal ganglia, through the roots, and then through the horns, and then back down to whatever muscle it needs to go to have that reflex action. Again, because when you're talking about a somatic response, you're wanting it to be quick, and you don't need to go through the whole chain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And so like this might sound stupid. So a somatic response is like, is it movement or no, it's like something that you're doing on purpose instead of autonomic. That's like
yeah.
Yeah, it's more of like a reflex, so to speak. Like it's a motor
Okay.
response.
Okay. So
So,
would like if I wanted to like flex my bicep, would it go through that pathway or am I just like that's completely off?
Um, Aaron, Matthew, you want to
It
back me up on
it
this?
would go through that pathway, but it wouldn't have a sensory. It wouldn't have. Oh, I'm trying to draw on the wrong one. It wouldn't have this dotted line because that's sensory and that's like the reflex part. But if you're just trying to get the action, it'll have the same like it'll go in through the ventral horn or anterior horn and then come out through here, and it's essentially the same thing, but it just won't have the um, it won't have the sensory portion.
Okay,
It'll
thank
come
you.
from it'll come from like your brain basically.
so
Like
if
the
I could just
premotor cortex,
clarify,
like the
um,
premotor cortex from that.
Yes. If you want to get into specifics, yes.
so for somatic pathways, essentially they're going to come up the anterior rami, up into the dorsal horn to make into the ventral horn to then make that action. Would you say that the that's going to go through those gray or white rami communicants, whereas somatic bypass that sympathetic ganglion or the paravertebral ganglion, if that makes sense?
Box. Yes, Maria. Posterior rami would be sensory. Anterior is motor. So again, anterior is always motor. Um, Dorsal is always going to be sensory.
That's the
So
same with roots as well.
my question really is then motor is going to bypass those paravertebral or sympathetic ganglions, whereas the vice versa, sensory, visceral, afferent is going to go through those gray and white rami communicants, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, again, like when we're talking about something that's visceral, we're going to follow that versus with somatic. All right. Is that a little bit more clear for everyone? Okay, sweet, Danielle. Okay. Any other questions y'all have? If not, we have some things. Unless y'all have something else. We have about 18 minutes left together.
I have one like simple question, and I don't know how effective it would be, but I guess and starting our second week in gross anatomy, I guess I'm kind of trying to plan as to how to best prepare, and was wondering for you guys what may have caught you off guard in your first exams, things that you wish that you had spent more time on, or if you rocked it and did awesome, I guess what you did.
I would just say this is a master's program or a doctor program for ETs and whatnot. So I would just say expect questions to be more tertiary instead of primary and secondary questions. Like it's not gonna maybe there'll be like a few questions like what is this or what's the definition of this, and those should be gimme questions. But a lot of the questions are gonna be patient relevant, like, oh, this our teacher liked doing stab wounds. So he'd be like, okay, this nerve was stabbed in like a stabbing accident or whatever. What is affected? What function is going to be impaired? Those kind of questions are what you should be expecting.
But also, it's a different teacher, so that may
Yeah,
not fall true. So ours was very
It's
particular with his
true,
questions.
but I still feel like they're most likely going to be asking questions like that. Just basically, like, you want to know the material well enough so that you can apply it. It's not just regurgitation. So, like, you want to really know as far as the lecture exams go, like, you really want to know, like, do I know this well enough to know how it can be applied. I think one thing that we can do when it gets a little bit closer to the exam time too is I still have like some of the reviews um, as far as like sample questions that we were given that are more of those like tertiary questions. Um, I like I listened to the lectures a lot and that really helped and it helped me do really well on the first exam. So I would just say like re-listen if you need to like multiple times. I know one of our classmates who re-listens to lectures probably about like I don't know, Eli probably listens like 4 times to each lecture. But I think that might be a little bit overkill to be able to help with balance. But yeah, I definitely would spend time like re-listening if you need to. I don't want to speak blasphemy and saying don't read your book, but for me personally, again, you guys have a different professor, but for me personally, reading the book did not help as much as re-listening to the lectures. It could be different with your professor, but that was my personal experience.
Yeah, I think for our teacher, he almost said the book is a reference for in our case. Since you're online, it's probably a little bit different. So could vary.
I feel like so far I've done most of my learning from the book.
Yeah.
And that'll be
Y'all,
different for each person. It'll be different for like again how your lectures might be. Like we haven't listened to any of your lectures either, so I don't know how your lectures are either.
so do y'all have any classmates that took them?
I do not think so. We only had like 2 people that went here prior to uh, the physical therapy program, and I don't know if he took them or not. But I can ask and see if he has anything to say.
There's a question from I don't want to say your name wrong, but is it Berkeley Fortune? It says going off of Mariah, so the impulse goes through the same track and then splits depending on the type. I don't know what you're asking, so if you can come on and explain your
Are you,
question.
are you talking about like kind of the last thing I explained with the somatic fibers?
Yeah, so like the impulse will go through the same track, and then when it gets to the posterior and the anterior rami, that's when it splits, depending on if it's sensory or motor impulse.
Um, Kind of. So it'll go through the same track like closer, and then once it'll split basically what you said. So yeah, pretty much.
So I'm sorry, I'm going over this again just to be clear. So the anterior and posterior rami splits off closer to where the reflex is about to happen, correct? So like in this picture, like how it separates on the what is this, the brachii muscle? That's where it's like anterior and posterior rami. Is that correct?
So the split, like you're talking about the little forks on the biceps, correct? Yeah, that's not necessarily anterior and posterior. That's more just showing more like nerve innervations. But no, so it's just going to be anterior, but why would it only be anterior? I saw your mouth moving, but you're still muted. But yes, because it's motor.
Because
Because
it's
dorsal,
motor.
yes,
So
because dorsal would go where?
from back.
Correct. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay,
No.
okay.
I had a question on dermatomes. So in our homework, we had a question about total anesthesia to the 10th thoracic dermatome. This is a result of lesions of what spinal nerves? Is it because they overlap that it's the one below and above?
Yeah. So let me find. picture. Can you repeat, Jillian? Was that you who was speaking?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, yeah. What was the question again?
Hold on. So there was a knife wound to the 10th dermatome resulting in complete anesthesia to the 10th thoracic dermatome. This condition is a result of lesions of what spinal nerves?
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, if you pull up, I think it's slide 40. Basically, the thing that you're wanting to recognize is where, like, this is going to be an important point. In fact, I can almost guarantee you you're going to have a question on your test having to do with this. And that's the kind of questions that you could expect to see on an exam. But if you look at where Aaron, can you go to slide 40 for me?
Oh, my bad.
There we go. Yeah. So, normally at like the vertebrae, it would come in the spinal nerve would exit from the intervertebral foramen at underneath, right? So like your T, if you look at right,
My bad.
it's okay. But if you look at like your T12, then your T12 nerve is exiting below. But when you get to an important thing to note is that when you get to cervical nerves exit above. So your C1 nerve is going to be exiting above your C1 vertebrae. But just kind of know this general idea that, like Aaron kind of has it mentioned here, how T10 vertebrae here and T11 is there, and so that's where you're going to have your T10 nerve root coming out. Does that make sense, Jillian? Okay, yeah, I definitely would know, like, they might ask you, like, if there is, between T10 and T11, the nerve is being pinched. Which nerve would this be? So kind of make sure that you know where those nerves would enter and exit. That would be important to know.
And same with cervical because it's kind of tricky. She kind of mentioned it already, Tanya did.
Is the cervical tricky because there's 8 cervical nerves? Is that why we have that like being thrown off by 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, go for
C1 C1 is above the or I'll draw it on it. So you can see C1 goes above, and all of the nerves correlating with the vertebrae go above until you get to C8, and then C8 is underneath the C7 vertebrae because we only have 7 cervical vertebrae, if that makes sense.
There's actually a really good Prep U question in the back section on just this. And it talks about how someone has like a crushed vertebrae between C4 and C5 and between T4 and T5 and which nerve each one is being impinged. You guys said just knowing that the cervical is above and below C7, they start coming below.
Yes.
Yeah, you can almost expect a question that will be like that.
Yeah, like I said, you can almost guarantee something like that will be on there. All right. This was a while ago, but someone also put in a question in here that says, could you walk through the pathway of motor and sensory where it starts and where that signal would end? Megan, what exactly do you mean? Can you come on and explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the picture that you were showing before. Yeah, this slide. If you could just start, like, if you did feel a sensory signal, just say on your arm, where is that pathway and how does that go through? Like, what structures does that go through to get to your brain, and vice versa for motor?
Okay. Aaron or
That
Matthew, I
makes
feel like
sense.
I've been like monopolizing the session, so do one of you guys want to explain it this time so it's coming from someone else?
I mean, I feel like you explained it pretty well. If you want to just give it another go. I mean, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I feel like you did better than I would.
Okay. All right. So you feel that touch of the iron, for example, right on your fingertip. So it's going to go through and it's going to hit that the spinal nerve at whatever level. So first you're going to yes get that touch. Their receptors in your fingers will tell you like, hey, I'm feeling this touch. It'll go to um that spinal nerve up through the dorsal root because we're talking sensory, right? So it's going through the dorsal rami, and then it's going to go through the cell bodies in the dorsal root ganglion, and then through the dorsal root, through the dorsal horn. Then you're going to go through the anterior horn, through the anterior root, and then back to the spinal nerve to whatever it is that, like in this case, it's the biceps to be able to have that reflex. So it's going to go specifically to the nerve that innervates the biceps to be able to flex.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Would this impulse from the touch be coming up the anterior ramus because it's a muscle of like your arm, the front, whereas if it was a back muscle, like a deep back muscle, it would be coming up the posterior ramus into that sensory ganglion?
Say that question one more time, Mark. Sorry.
No worries. So he's touching the iron, and in that general sensory impulse is coming up and goes through that anterior ramus, then the ganglion, then the dorsal roots into the dorsal horn. And my question was, is that because it's the bicep, whereas if it was a deep muscle of the back, like iliocostalis, it might come up the dorsal ramus, then into that ganglion, and then through the dorsal roots.
Correct. Yes,
I'm just
because
trying to figure out the
yes,
difference
because we're
between
not
the
talking
anterior and
about
posterior.
yes, because we're not talking about the back. We're talking about front. So
Okay,
yes,
cool.
you'd be correct in saying that. I might have switched them around when I just said it, but yes, thank you for catching that. Does that help out, Megan?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted a quick summary just to make sure I was thinking about it right. So yeah, it was helpful. Thank you.
Sounds good. We have a couple more minutes. If you guys have more questions.
Is there anything you guys think we should focus on for this like first overview chapter and the chapter of the back that we should definitely make sure we, are working towards studying?
I have some thoughts. Again, I feel like I've been talking this whole time though. So Aaron and Matthew, if you guys want to jump in too.
I can chime in there. So we made like an outline or list of things that we felt you guys would probably be important to you guys. So I'm just gonna name them out right now. If you can stop me at any point to see if you have any quick questions. We do only have a couple minutes, but let me just start. So from the first PowerPoint, we got anatomical position, planes, positions, motions, your skin layers, burns, axial versus appendicular skeleton, your types of bones, characteristics of compact versus spongy bones, types of joints, types of muscles, types of contractions, layers of the muscle, nerves. Let's see, and then for the back is a little more straightforward. So we have number of vertebrae in each section, so know how many cervical vertebrae you have, thoracic and lumbar. Know the difference between your primary curvature and your secondary curvature. You want to know the parts of a like your vertebral bones, and how to differentiate between a cervical, thoracic, and a lumbar. And then pars inarticularis and how it's related to spondylolisthesis lysis and spondylolisthesis. Your ivy disc annulus versus your nucleus pulposus. Anterior longitudinal ligament, posterior longitudinal ligament, ligamentum flavum, dermatomes T4 and T10, the structures at the end of spinal cord, meninges, and then potentially lumbar puncture, like the location of those. I know that was a long list, and I don't know if anyone can track, but
that was a great list, actually. Thank you. Real quick on one of the things you mentioned for the bones, do you think in the lab portion of the test that we were probably going to take, we'll need to be able to identify specific bone markings, such as like condyle, tuberosity, things like that, just by seeing it?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so, yes.
And also I mean, this might be, again, I don't know how much you guys have covered, but like if you have gone over like where things attach, like he might ask you like, okay, I mean, this is an obvious example, like, okay, the deltoid tuberosity, like what is it that like attaches here? Obviously that would be deltoid, but like along those lines, like if there's a bone marking, know what attaches to it. Okay.
That'll help you a ton later on too. So especially for PTs, I'm assuming everybody is a PT in here, but for us later on in classes, if you know the attachments and stuff, that'll help you like dramatically.
Just to wrap up here, just so you guys know, I'm gonna go ahead and put my phone number in here, but we are having another session on Friday. What is it? It's at 1, yeah?
Let me double check.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, 1
Friday,
p.m.
1 to 2.
And we're doing it at the same location, everything. It's going to be mostly for the PAs, but you guys are welcome to join in. It's going to be over the same material. Another thing is too, if you feel like maybe, hey, group session isn't working so hot for me and I just want like a one-on-one or even a smaller group session, you're welcome to text any one of us, me, Aaron, or Matthew. You can pick and choose who you want, which tutor you want to tutor you or to have a small group with you, and we can organize that with you. I'm going to put my phone number in here so that it's available for you guys. And then there's Aaron and Matthews too. So yeah, feel free to contact us if you guys need one-on-one sessions or want a smaller group, because again, there's only so much that we can go over in 1 hour. But hopefully that might help too. So there's that individual or small group sessions, and then we're also having another session at on Fridays at 1 as well. Anything else you guys want to add?
Nope. Yeah, we'll be here for a little bit if you have any other questions for us, but as far as this goes, you guys are free to go. Feel free to text us if you need anything, and hope the rest of the semester is going to go pretty good with it.
And thank you for your patience, as this was our first time doing this way. Wait.
Yep, well, we'll be here if you guys need us. You guys are free to go, so thank you.
Just quick question. Is cardiac muscle the only muscle that's that acts myogenically from muscle fiber to muscle fiber rather than by direct nerve stimulation?
I'm not too sure about that.
I'm just reading in my book for cardiac muscle. It says contractile stimuli are largely propagated myogenically rather than by direct nerve stimulation. I was wondering if that was specifically for cardiac muscle. If you don't know, that's fine.
I believe it is,
Yeah, I believe so.
but I don't know right off the top of my head
Yeah, so
because
oh, sorry.
because
Go ahead, Aaron.
because the heart is autonomic, whatever, so it kind of does its own thing almost, because it needs to constantly contract, versus muscle doesn't need to contract internally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
kind of a vague answer, I didn't dive into too much detail, but
if you pull up your slides on slide 24, it kind of gives the differences between the different muscle types. And so, yes, heart muscle is the only one that is stimulated myogenically, but it isn't the only one that has involuntary control because your smooth muscle is also involuntary. So, myogenically, yes. Involuntary, no. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just trying to see if there's any other things I have questions on, but I think we're good.
I definitely would know that slide as far as like the differences. You could almost guarantee something
We'll
those
be on there.
lines. So yeah.
What page? What slide page?
That was slide 24. It's basically just the differences between the muscle types of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. So the main things that you really want to pay attention to with those are like, sorry, is like the nuclei, like how, and also striations, like whether they have striations or not, or how they're are they multinucleated, are they single nucleated, those kind of things.
How do we? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we locate this recording?
So we won't have it up today, but it should be up in 24 hours, I think, via a YouTube link, or I believe it's going to be on YouTube somewhere. But
I can chime in on that one. Hey guys, so we're going to get this recording online. I'll get this on as soon as possible. What we'll do is I will send a link to all of you guys on Canvas, all of you students on Canvas, to show you where the archive is at, so you can just go to the link and then get the recording from there. So yes, everything has been recorded. So if you missed anything, you'll be able to go back on it, but I will make sure that you guys get that link for sure. Thank you for that question.
I don't know if you have time today, maybe next session, but I was just looking at the intermediolateral cell columns. And I was trying to figure out what their relationship is to the anterior and posterior great horns.
can you give like a slide that you're kind of referring to, so I can kind of get a visual at the same time?
I'm just looking in the book, so I'm not exactly
okay.
sure what slide it is. This is the picture.
So, I think I know what you're talking about. So that is something you'll probably go over more in neuro. Those are just a lot of the columns, a lot of the tracks that come from the brain for certain things. So when you get to neuro, that's actually a pretty big concept and test that you guys will be tested on. So yeah, as far as anatomy, I wouldn't worry about the columns too much. But in neuro, you're definitely going to go over them.
Yeah.
We're actually taking neuro this first semester instead of the second semester due to COVID. So maybe I'll present this to my neuro teacher, see what she says.
Yeah, Dr. Liphart's that ends up being like a whole test where you have to like draw all the tracks into those columns and stuff. So for sure, that's something you guys are going to go over.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I got
No
your phone
problem.
numbers if I have any more questions.
Awesome.
No problem.
Alrighty, guys. Take care. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Let me lock the room. Hang on. How'd it go? Good job so far, by the way. I was actually in the entire session just making sure things are running okay, but I know things have been rocky this first go around, but job well done so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for answering some of those harder questions.
See,
That
I
was a
felt
little
like
rough.
completely out of my depth in some of like
No,
some of
you
it,
did
but
fine. I just when you asked us to answer them, like I don't know the answer. I'm sorry, Tanya, I can't help you.
no, it's fine. Hold on a second. My computer is